Thank you very much, sir. Hello all. How are we today? Cool. All good. So we've got a few topics on the agenda. A couple of them are continuation of the previous meeting, and then some nice new ones for us. So without further ado, an update on the PRs for the working group stubs. Who'd like to go first on that one?
Eric? Let's see. I can cover what we had continuing from last week. I don't think I had done any actual revisions to the app runtime platform draft yet, but I was still coordinating with Amelia to get a sense of which folks from the approver pool on the VMware side would actually want to take on that level of responsibility. That's also, I know we'd identified a number of folks from SAP and some other folks in the community. So we should probably check with them on their level of willingness to take on that responsibility before we finalize that. But we can try to do that over the next week.
Okay, cool. I had a nice chat with Emily and Ryan, and I've managed to work through with them getting the Paketo governance structure and members together in what I call a more pragmatic way, I think, for our PR purpose. So there's a single source of truth for both of those things. And I've been able to get it to a point where I've taken it out of a whip. So it's ready for consideration.
Great.
Jan, you're on mute.
See it. I've just added a comment to that thing, to the link to the Paketo governance document. Just like with a question, if there, like, we either should look for a potential convergence with the working groups and roles documents in the community repo, at least look for potential incompatibilities, and at the very least, there should be some mention or link to the principles document to make clear they are, like, even if it's a separate project with its own governance structure, there needs to be some link to that. I was even thinking about commenting on the membership thing, if, like, given they have a steering committee, if that is either the working group leadership team, or if there's really a separate thing, if the TOC should have a seat in that steering committee, even if it's as a whole or whatever. But it's not, yeah, I didn't comment that yet. That was just a thought.
So with the conversation I had with Emily and Ryan, the steering group is very much kind of Emily and Ryan, so they sort of map quite nicely in as being the interface between the Paketo group and ourselves.
Which is one of the reasons I'd say we could maybe, like, ask the Paketo leadership team to get rid of that steering committee and just make that the working group leadership. They can nominate others to that working group leadership as well. Because right now this seems to match pretty nicely, because I suppose both will step up as potential leaders, and I don't see a reason not to actually appoint them for such. So it is the same now, which is a good opportunity to say, let's actually, like, align a little bit on that governance structure, if that doesn't hurt adoption, which, yeah, it shouldn't. Like, it's part of the CFF community. Without leaving the CFF community, they won't get rid of that. And then this kind of alignment sounds like something we could actually request them to do as a CFF TOC. It's still no strong opinion from my side. I guess I would be hard on the principles thing, like that transparency. I guess there's no conflict there, but
yeah,
we definitely have to make sure there is not. All the rest is like my 2 cents, but no really strong objection on that.
And that wouldn't, I mean, if we understand that those are the same structures of leadership, like, that really wouldn't prevent us from adopting the charter for them as a working group within the community repo, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. So I think at this point, shall we call it open for our reviews and comments?
Yeah, sounds good.
Excellent. Excellent. David, how's your stuff been going?
Hold on. Sorry, I'm on.
No
I'm
problem.
actually on vacation. I'm just calling in to say hello and see if there's anything super exciting. So I haven't made any progress in the last week, though Ruben has an appointment with me on Monday when I get back from this trip. So I think we'll hopefully have some progress on that one on Monday. And I'm trying to find a good candidate on the services side to help me with that PR. Somebody who's really interested in the probably somebody working on Cloud Service Broker right now to help me flesh out that.
Okay, cool. I've just lost my notes again. There we are. Okay. So that's all looking all right, I think. All there. So in terms of identifying working group leads, I think we've kind of covered an awful lot of that off there as part of the stubs that are currently in progress. So I think there's tagging in and seeking consensus that way. Yeah, so some of the engineer better people are seemingly quite keen, so they're definitely worth tagging in on the relevant ones where they've already been identified. Yeah, so I think that's okay. Anything that anyone would like to add to that one?
I think we're still looking for people who would be leading the deployments working group for app runtime. There isn't a clear lead who's stepping forward yet, but I think we can keep deferring that while we firm up this first round of charters and confirm the leadership there, because obviously, if we've been saying Picado is ready to go, we're closing in on several of the other ones. So.
Okay. Cool. So then the first of the new topics, discussing the future of the monthly CAB call. I believe you added this one, didn't you, Eric?
Yeah, I think at Chip's prompting, when I was inquiring last week if this was actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two components to it, right? There's the Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes SIG call that Bernd from SAP has been running, which tends to kind of come and go in level of interest. I think the same thing applies to the CAB call. So my suggestion, both to Bernd as well as Eric, when we talked about the CAB call, was to say, look, these are community things. They shouldn't be just kind of run because they've always been run. So the TOC should make a decision here, I think. Is there value in them? Does it make sense to take components of that at some point and just make that the TOC call? And equivalent organizations with TOCs often have projects come in to give kind of updates, or working groups come in and give updates, right? So this might be an appropriate venue. I don't know, maybe once a month it expands agenda. I'm just throwing some brainstorming thoughts out there. But those two are very stranded items on the monthly calendar that could use your thoughts to make sure that they're either A, valuable, or B, rolled into something else, or just eliminate the activity.
I'm just thinking, how many working groups was it? I'm just doing some mental math to think, how would that fit?
Well, we've got 8 proposed, some of which are fairly light. Are you thinking, Lee, in terms of some sort of like how much space there would be in terms of a regular rotation.
Yeah, I was thinking, what would a cadence look like of a regular rotation? So, I mean, that would then become bi-monthly, which is probably that feels like it's going to be a bit too long a gap, is my thinking.
Well, you're assuming we'd have one working group kind of discussion per TOC meeting.
Yeah, and rotate through.
Well, I mean, I think we'll see how long those would end up taking in practice, but given that we have an hour time slot for TOC meetings, and as things have been settling down, it doesn't seem like we've been using the full hour even.
No.
So, you know, it might even be possible to have like 2 of those working group meetings, or, you know, working group discussions with the leadership of those groups per TOC meeting. Or I had kind of, I think, envisioned, maybe just based on seeing this in other communities, but something like a 6-week cadence for checking with the working group. So it'd be roughly twice a quarter. And that would leave some amount of space for these other community topics, if we just wanted to consider folding them into the TOC call.
Makes sense to give it a try. That's the joy of agile working.
I mean,
we
certainly in
can,
terms of the.
Go on, Eric.
Oh no, go ahead, Jan.
Is like, yeah, I guess based on time zones, I never really participated in the CAB call. So I don't really know what's going on topic-wise because of interest. I did participate in the ZIC call, although it was after office hours for me. I could imagine that like it might make sense to have kind of a virtual working group looking into what do we do with CF on Kubernetes, and then there would be even a working group, even if like a virtual one, a temporary one, or whatever one. That can cover these topics, but I'm fine with just trying to squeeze that into the TOC calls as well. Like, but it is more like one sounds like coordinating with the community, like informing them about things, and the other is at least partially about discussing how should we approach the Kate's thing, so to say. I think it's split a little between the community interested in using CF on Kubernetes and the CF community itself, like the different groups, different interested parties, to discuss how to do that, bringing CF experience on Kubernetes. So it looks like a little bit different than the other call, please.
They are very different. So just the SIG call, the Kubernetes SIG call, I mean, that is the work of the project fundamentally, right? Like there's going to be a group of people who have that focus, and it may be one of these things. I honestly don't quite remember where things are being placed right now, but if it's a subset of people inside of one of the working groups, well, then they just need to decide as a group that they're going to have, you know, a public meeting. And I think just a good practice for all of the working groups is that there needs to be public conversation that they're having, right? Otherwise, it's like, well, how are they working together, right? And it might be, that it only happens once a quarter if it's kind of a low velocity thing. But my thought is that CF for Kate's conversation is in fact a collaborative conversation of people that have an interest in that, and that is exactly why you're supposed to structure working groups or sub-working groups, right? That's like the exact purpose for them. And then like to the update to the broader community, right? If we switch to the CAB calls, they always intended to have a regular cadence of updates from the PMCs and the projects. Eric has always done a very consistent job of trying to provide that out to the community. So they do sort of represent, I think, 2 things, right? One is a moment in time in which community technical leadership pauses and updates everyone on what's happening. It doesn't require the quote CAB call to do that, right? But that is a useful activity that everyone gets value from. Even though, Eric, you might not have felt it, it was always very easy to point people at those notes, right? To say like, you know, here's what's happening. The second thing is that there are often projects that are open source but single vendor, or open source but single person, that end up getting highlighted in the cab call because they're like cool demos, right? They kind of extend in a certain way, or, you know, Stark and Wayne's come up with their latest, you know, crazy concoction of you know, useful functionality of Bosch, and they want to share that. So there's some benefit in sharing. So anyway, that's the way I think about what those activities are. I think it's those 3 buckets, right? 2 of those buckets, specifically the CF for Kate SIG and the updates from the people writing code and user stories, like those should just be integrated into the project normal workflow. And then the questions: do you care to run something that represents a slightly broader ecosystem conversation?
Yeah, agreed. I think that breakdown makes sense to me. And so I think for, you know, a lot of those first 2 buckets do seem like they could either happen in the TOC conversation, or they could be structured as those working group meetings. So I think for the cab call specifically, we need to identify if we want a place for that kind of community showcase, because we should be getting a lot of that other value out of the structure that is descending from the TOC.
Okay, so that's kind of leading me to think, you know, the more cab call makes sense to try and fit that within the TOC itself, to knit those 2 together, and then yeah, the SIGs have those more focused within the work groups themselves.
Well, I guess that's a question of, you know, do we want to occasionally turn the TOC meeting over to some community guest speaker to do a demo? I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that would depend on, well, you know, are there people in the community who are doing projects that they would be interested in showcasing in any kind of forum, and then, you know, identifying those or cultivating those and actually getting those into some sort of pipeline. You know, that has also required work. It's needed somebody to do it. You know, Dr. Max at IBM did it for many years and then turned it over to Troy for a while. And then Chris Clark has been doing that more recently. So I know Chris is, he's out right now, and you know, he'll have, I think, maybe a little bit more administrative responsibility when he comes back, which we should also talk about. So I'm not sure how much, you know, I feel like we would want to check with him about whether he would even be a good person to continue trying to solicit any of that or even organize that, or if that you know, would fall on someone else in the community, potentially on one of us.
Yeah, I just wanted to chip in with one point and emphasize on, excuse me, having like an owner, because as long as there was like a proper owner for these calls, the topics had been coming and the discussions were vibrant and we had like a ton of stuff going. But because of various constraints, there's been like a lack of ownership and a weird set of circumstances, I guess. But that has really sort of dried out the vibrance and some of the activity around that. So just some context from having attended these for like the past year.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right there, Ram. It does need somebody to actually own it and drive it forwards. So is it worth checking with the current people? I'm having a mental block at the moment. Was it Chris that was doing it before?
Yeah,
I mean-
Chris Clark's been doing it. He's out until September 20th.
Okay. Do we need a decision before then, do we think?
I mean, I think the next one on the calendar is probably mid-September. So, we have even a couple of weeks before then to figure out if that should continue or if it should continue in its current time slot and cadence. I think that it is before Chris gets back. It's probably scheduled for the 15th. So, I mean, it seems unlikely that we would have anyone available or in the pipeline for that call. So we could just table this for discussion. Like we could maybe figure that we're going to cancel that one in September because there's really nobody seems to be organizing it, and then discuss in late September and early October if there is anyone who'd be willing to take on that work of organizing that as a more specifically a community forum for projects on whether that's monthly or a different cadence.
Ram, do you think you would want to take a swing at trying to just organize the September one to give these folks a little breathing room?
Sure, why not?
Sure, that'd be great, Ram.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Just really fast brainstorming. Ram, one of the things that Bernd had lined up was a demo of KF from the product manager who leads that over at Google for the CF for Kate's SIG call. Bernd is trying to figure out how to basically not run that SIG call anymore. So maybe you could reach out to him, grab that demo. That's a good initial starter for September's CAB call. And then we can, the TSC could get back to Bernd to say, let's just tear down the SIG. That work should be happening in the projects.
Sure, sounds good.
Well, I think there might still be some interim value. I know Bernd has been organizing that CF Kate's SIG meeting, but which we've certainly appreciated. But I think that there is a certain amount of activity that's going on there right now. In fact, some of the VMware and SAP folks just posted about it on CF Dev yesterday. So I mean, I feel like we're certainly going to have to get that under the working group structure as those things finish. But I don't know that we would want to necessarily like remove that forum right now. In fact, I know that we ended up canceling those SIG meetings, like the last couple of them, because of Bernd's schedule. But I think they would have been fine just to proceed, given the level of activity that's going on there anyway. So that's again where I see this as kind of right now. It's a little bit of an informal working group around this activity that we haven't put into the current working group structure or decided on as a separate working group. But I wouldn't necessarily want to remove that forum from the community calendar yet, if there are opportunities for it to occur.
So but that also leads me to thinking, should we actually start establishing the CF on Kate's topic as a probably virtual kind of like a separate working group that will probably have members of other working groups as members?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to decide some sort of structure for that. Whether that's, within the existing working groups that we have, or, maybe as that kind of virtual working group that could be more, maybe, more temporary or something.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's more inside a working group. That's probably the interfaces done. I don't know if there's other things like Paketo could be another one that should be interested in the topic, probably. As that's that, but I don't know if there's more, right? So maybe it fits into the interfaces working group, although this one is already quite big. So just adding another thing to the scope, I can hear my colleague already yelling it.
Yeah.
So
you know, and that's, you know, I think that's interesting. We could you know, potentially decide like, well, this is a working group that there's at least the possibility or likelihood that the structure is temporary and that it should get incorporated into one or more of the working groups, or that things should potentially get reorganized if it really picks up steam. But so maybe even having some explicit mention in the charter of like, you know, reevaluating the structure of this after some period of time or after some milestones to see how it should fit within the existing structure. It's kind of like an excited state for the working group structure that, you know, eventually should settle down to some sort of steady state. You know, that said, I think, you know, coming back to the topic of the CAB call and these other community forums, I know that like we'd had Micah scheduled for September 6th, and you know, I think there's some degree of interest in having him talk about the work that he was planning to present on with KF and how that might relate to what's going on right now. And so I could see some resistance to deferring that yet again to mid-September to be part of the CAB call, when it also wouldn't be as aligned to the discussion with that ongoing work in the community. I mean, it would effectively be just moving that discussion to a week or so later on the calendar. So I think for the time being, I'd propose keeping the current CF on Kate's SIG call, at least for that September instance, and not trying to move that to the community call in mid-September.
Cool, that seems sensible. So I think that sort of covers off those two quite nicely, actually, for this moment in time. Which moves us on to RAM.
Yeah, I think Chip had mentioned early on about wanting to get folks on these live streams that we're doing, and I had an opportunity to just post a note on what I was thinking. I think the biggest challenge about these is scheduling, and the calls are probably much easier to just have and stream it and all that stuff. So fortunately, we've had like folks respond in terms of general timeframes when they're available. And earlier today, we've had Capital E give his time for me. So we're scheduled to have that conversation with Lee on the 22nd of September. And that will be 5 p.m. British summer time. And I think it translates into something convenient across the pond. So we have that. Eric, I know we exchanged a few messages about finding some time. Sorry, I didn't follow up on that. But from reading through the chat, you mentioned that mid-September works well for you. So hopefully that's still true.
Yeah, probably. I mean, getting a couple of weeks of lead time to schedule something, especially in the early morning or so. I guess you had said, yeah, I'd have to check on the timing, but if we can just work out specifics at least a few weeks in advance, that's helpful.
No problem. So I was thinking 16th September, and the timing being the same, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. PT.
Yeah, I think that would work. We can follow up offline.
Got it. Let me do that. Jan, sorry, I haven't reached out to you because you were on vacation, I believe. So, so basically the idea is to get folks together on the call, just have a discussion about, what we are trying to accomplish here collectively as a community, and also share some ideas about what you would specifically like to see individually, and what are some of the ideas you had. So we're looking to get this going as early as like beginning of September. So is that, would you happen to have some time between like the 1st and the 15th or so?
You're on mute, unfortunately.
Mute again. Yeah, I guess that should be possible. What is the envisioned time for that? Like time of the day?
It could really be anything. So we're going to have it streamed, but also it's going to be available on YouTube. So ideally, whatever is working hours for you.
But it's like it has to work for your and my time zone, right?
Yeah, we're probably like a couple of hours apart. So I won't worry about it too much.
From where are you working?
I'm based out of India. So,
okay, so that's 5.5 hours, I think, right? So there's a good overlap.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess then that should make it easier, because then I just have to fix that with my work calendar, not with my private calendar. So what did you say? It's like the first 2 weeks of September.
Yep.
Yeah, we should find a time slot there.
Okay. Between like the 7th to the 10th would be ideal. So that way we can have like one every week. But if it has to be something else,
I think that should be possible.
Okay.
I'll make up some thoughts and propose something. What's it in terms of length? What's the plan there?
It'll be an hour that we'll schedule, but we'll probably stay live for 45 to 50 minutes, I guess.
And it's like one-on-one, right?
One-on-one, yes.
One-on-one, and there's a proposed potential list of talking points. Yeah. Okay. So I can prepare for at least some of those talking points.
Sure.
Yeah, sounds fine.
Cool. I'll follow up with you offline as well, and let's finalize the date and everything. Stefan did mention that he was on vacation, and he has also given me likely date. So I'll follow up with him separately, and I'll wait for David to come back from vacation as well. I don't want to bother him.
Sounds good, Ram. Thanks.
Sure.
Cool.
That's all I had, Lee. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. In terms of any other business, well, it's a bit of a week this week, isn't it, Chip?
Yeah. So obviously, I'm headed out. This is my last week. It's a bit of blast, but I'm headed off to go ship some product. It's been too long. So the main thing that I wanted to leave you all with is a couple things. So first, the way the CFF is going to operate moving forward is going to be much more akin to a lot of the other projects or quote foundations that are in the LF. The word foundation is just frankly a marketing moniker in a lot of ways, right? Because it's really just a directed fund inside of a bigger nonprofit. So the LF has a lot of shared services. And so that plus, the amazing folks like like RAM who contract with it, are dedicated to the project. Chris Clark's going to essentially take what's called a program manager or project manager style role. So his job is going to be to help coordinate the governing board, to kind of track budgets and make sure, you know, people that are working on marketing or DevRel or whatever are delivering for both you as well as for the governing board. The ED role, when you align it with the rest of the LF, is largely around membership sales. So there, for the time being, there's not going to be an ED because this is not like a high sales cycle community right now. So we aimed for setting up, or actually over the last about 18 months, we've been transitioning to predominantly trying to focus all activities on supporting the technical community and making sure that you all kind of owned this going forward. So that said, Chris is out. It's kind of an awkward transition for about a month, but you know, bear with him, he'll be back. So he'll be back on September 20th. I'll pop back in to spend some time with him to just do the, do kind of a better handoff, both in terms of where the governing board wants things to head strategically, but also some of the tactical items. One of the things that I'm very close, I'm waiting for, I think, 2 more responses from governing board members, was to pre-lock in the 2022 budget and get that approved. The important bit for the TOC is to know that the CI request, infrastructure request, which we had pegged at about $400,000 US for the year of 2022, its calendar and fiscal are aligned. Everybody's agreed to that. And then the other area that the TOC is going to have budget allocated to it directly is in what we're calling contributor experience. And there's a few things that you may choose to use that for over the course of next year. Some of that might be things like swag or t-shirts for a team or whatever, right? You could all think about how you might want to do that. We've got vendors we can work with, or the LF has vendors that they can work with to get that stuff kicked out. The reason why it's not a much lower number, because swag, you really, if you spend $100,000 on swag, that would be amazing, but boy, I don't even know what you would buy at that point. The question of should there be an event has come up, whether that's in person as just like a meeting style event, whether that is a track that you choose to kind of sponsor at some other LF event, or whether you run it as a kind of a virtual gathering of some sort. There's money in there for that. So I'm not looking for you to have anything close to an answer right now, but after Chris is back, like he'll get looped in here. Just between now and then, think about how you might want to structure 2022 contributor collaboration, knowing that you do have some dollars. 100 grand is not a lot of money for an in-person event, just to be very clear. Those things cost closer to $1 million, often. So there are some, rent some meeting space and have everybody, just show up somewhere opportunities. But he'll be able to work with the LF events team, who knows how to do the full gamut, the full spectrum of event scale, from meetings up through, large trade shows like KubeCon, right? And you'll be able to figure out what you might want to do if you want to do anything with it. I would also say, don't think about budget planning as you roll forward through the years, as you may in some large companies where you use it or lose it. The best thing to do is to use it all wisely. And it's okay if it goes unspent, if there's no need for it, right? It's a nonprofit with a limited surplus that we're rolling over from this year to next. So just think about it not as if there's a big revenue stream tied to it, but that every dollar does count, and the better you are at kind of keeping costs down or doing the right things, I think the better outcome you'll have years going by.
Basic question: can we take budget to the next year or not?
Absolutely.
Like at least.
Well,
okay, yeah.
Actually, let me rephrase that. The overall organization budget is not very high. Right? It's not much, right? And in fact, just so you have a sense, total expense right now in the proposal for 2022 is 1.6 million. And we just talked about $500,000 worth of money that y'all are going to take some responsibility for allocating, right? So you've got roughly a third of the overall budget that you're responsible for. In terms of priorities, the agreed priorities for the governing board essentially revolve around the community's work, right? And so the things that are outside of what they're asking you to make choices around are just kind of keeping some amount of public awareness going as the project evolves, continuing to maintain and update the different educational materials that are out there, the professional cert that's out there. So there's not a ton of wiggle room in that. So you're not handed 400,000 from one bucket and then 100,000 for this community engagement bucket and told, well, whatever you specifically do not spend will roll to next year. I think this is a conversation with the governing board, right? Just philosophically, the approach to managing the money that works best is that everyone, all the different programs, try to underspend, because that makes sure that there's a little bit of rollover surplus, and that's only done at the top level. And in fact, the budget that's being put forward is going to be a deficit of 100,000. So we're going to be spending down the roughly $1 million worth of carry forward that's going to go from 2021 to 2022. So they want to spend that down a little bit. So that was a long-winded answer, Jan, but don't think of it as like, this is your money, it's in a bank account that you get to use the next year. But also, don't spend it just because it's in a budget, right? It'll, the technical community is the #1 priority for the governing board. So you're going to get what is possible to get each year, as the conversation happens. Make sense?
Yep, thanks.
Cool. All right, well, that was actually it. I just wanted to give you all a sense of the conversation around budget for next year. I know that the CI infrastructure was very important, and then 2, kind of operationally, how you're going to be supported, and 3, just recognize that the whole point now, the foundation, is really to support the work of the whole technical community, and you all are the elected leaders of that group. So that collaboration should be quite smooth and good.
Other question to the 400K for CI. Do we know what the expected cost is? So is that basically spent by the cost that was already in place in the past years? I guess that was mostly spent by VMware.
Yeah, I mean, we made a very brief back of the napkin estimate for that. I think you're right. It would basically be shifting costs around and centralizing CI infrastructure. So it's not like there's suddenly 400K available for extensive testing of things that haven't been tested before. That being said, we have quite good test coverage. So I don't think we need to be testing a lot of new configurations that we're not already.
Yep, makes sense.
Cool. Any other questions on that item on your agenda, or not on your agenda that I added? All right then.
You won't be talking now about where you're headed. So I'm just waiting for the announcement on Twitter.
Good. Suspense.
Yeah, there's nothing else that I can think of that instantly springs to mind, and you're not disappearing 100%, so you'll still be reachable. But I would like to thank you very much for your service. This has been a long and excellent tenure.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, you're right. They've got the internet on computers now. We can use it. So I'll be around.
Yeah, thanks, Chip, very much for all of your contributions to the community over the years. We certainly wouldn't be here where we are today with this level of success without your dedicated effort and persistence. So we all really appreciate it. And certainly best of luck to you in your next thing.
Thanks, Eric. Y'all are going to do great. You're in a great position, and whether it's this group or part of this group, as you kind of roll forward, the community is really solid. Keep welcoming new people, right? Keep finding ways to get more of that organic contribution happening. And I think there's a lot of users out there that do care quite a bit.
And at some point, we'll have to eventually get together for an actual leaving pint.
I haven't left my house in 18 months. I don't know what you're talking about.
It might be 2023, but we'll get there. Has anyone got anything else to add to today? Okay, in which case I suggest we all gain 10 minutes then. All right. Thank you very
Thanks,
much,
everyone.
all. And I will catch you in 3 weeks' time because of vacation.
Oh, great. Thanks, Lee.
All right. Cheers.
Enjoy the
Take
time
care.
off.
Bye.
Well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.